Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Today we're going to talk about math in Final Fantasy VI, um, and I am excited to do that. Final Fantasy VI is one of the best games that I've ever played. It is one of those Final Fantasy games where I think a lot of people, at least from my experience, agree on. That doesn't always happen with Final Fantasy games. Some are weirdly divisive, but six is one of the ones where a lot of people, again, based on my experiences, agree on it being good. Also, real quick, like I know, like for some people, they were introduced to Final Fantasy VI way back in the day, and when they were introduced to it, they were introduced to it as Final Fantasy III because the way the order worked back then, at least in the States, was we got one, two, and three, but they weren't really one, two, and three. They were one, four, and six, which is kind of crazy. But I just bring that up because of that always fascinates me that that was the case. But a lot of people over time they've gotten used to calling it six, or if they do say that they played three, they'll say like really six or something to that nature. In any case, it is one hell of a game, and I dig it and I recommend it. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the combat, and we'll use that to introduce other elements of the game and talk about how math is in it all and how it all connects. And spoilers ahead, definitely spoilers ahead. So if you don't want any spoilers for Final Fantasy VI, I get not wanting to watch this video. If you don't care or you've already played it, please feel free to stay. Either way, let's get into it. And just to be safe, spoilers ahead. So, as far as the comic goes for Final Fantasy VI go, I like it. I dig it. It's fun. There's a lot of customization options, but we'll get to that. To start with the basic premise and then expand from there. The idea is that you're dishing out, you know, attacks while trying to not take attacks, right? So it's like you're dishing out damage while trying to not take it, and if you take it, you're trying to nullify it, um, you know, or lessen it, or make use of it, whatever the case may be. So you have that basic premise. You're dealing with your health. You're dealing with the idea of dishing out damage versus taking it, and it's something that's inherently mathematical. And I dig that. And then you have that basic idea, and it expands beautifully to me, because here's the thing, right? So as you're doing that, right, you are going back and forth with your opponents, and you're strategizing in order to like survive that fight, right? And when you do, you're gaining experience points, and as you gain experience points, you're gaining levels. As you're gaining levels, you're increasing your stats, increasing what you've learned along the way, right? And then later, when we talk about summons, it's like those battles help you, learn different magic techniques along the way with those. But we'll get to that. So you have that basic idea of attacking and trying to nullify or lessen damage, or repurpose it. And yeah, so it's essentially math. Like I said, you have that idea of getting experience points from that and leveling up and boosting your stats, and all of that is math. All of that is awesome. And so, but it doesn't stop there, right? Because as you progress through the game, not only do you have your physical attacks, right, but you have your magic attacks, um, and you have the idea that you have your equipment, right? And with your equipment, you have different weapons, different armor, and different types of armor. Not only that, you have the idea of relics or accessories, depending on which game you're talking about. In this one, they're called relics. You can equip up to two for each character. There's a wide range of, qualities for them, a wide range of effects, right? Some boost different types of stats, right? Some may like boost your defense or boost your evasion or boost like several stats at once, while others may give you different abilities or allow you to upgrade abilities or allow you to negate some damage or lessen damage or lessen MP costs. There's a wide range of effects from all of the relics, right? And all of that's math. So you have all these different things, and at the end of the day, you're just like interacting with the math differently, right? You're able to customize it and see what you do. So you have the idea, like I said, of the basic combat, but then you have the equipment, the relics, and your weapons, and getting to customize all that. And you're able to learn different magical techniques, and you're able to do that through the espers. And we're gonna get into that because, like, at the beginning of the game, right? There's like two characters that can use magic by themselves. Like you have Terra, and that's the only one that you see for a while. Then you have Celeste, and they have different reasons for why that is. But at first, they're the only two that can do it. But as you go on throughout the game, you have the idea of espers, and for the uninitiated, they're summons, just by a different name, right? Because you have espers, summons, icons, other names, aeons, other names, but they get at the same thing. And with these espers, when they die, they give off like a crystal, like magicite, and that magicite allows you to use and learn magic. And so throughout the game, is your experience in your combat, you have different espers or different magicite that came from the espers, and you're able to learn different techniques that you can use to your advantage. And so with that magic involved, not only are you dealing with your health, your HP, but now you're dealing with MP. And so you're like, well, do I want to use this magic? And you can use the espers through their magicite, their associated magicite. It's like, well, do I use the magic or do I use the summon? And for those summons or espers, you can use them once per battle. So it's like they do cost MP for that battle, and you can use them once per battle. So you have to be strategic. And with said espers, they not only give you magical abilities, but they come with different effects, right? Some are just straight up damage dealers, right? But then you have others that they're able to do like different status effects, or cause your evasion to go up and stuff like that. So like they can cause status effects, they can boost stats, and like I said, some of that might be like, oh, I might have one that increases evasion, but I might have another that increases my physical defense or my magical defense, and you have things along those lines. And at the end of the day, right, that's all math. That's all cool. And you can customize and you can make it so that you have people have as many magical techniques as they can. And I think that's cool because when you think about it, right, you're like, okay, well, I'm training up these characters. And so it's like you can have them have these different espers. And if you're the type of person who will use the espers in battle, you can have it so that, oh, I want them to have these type of espers in battle, like, oh, I want a damage dealer, I want someone who will increase my stats, or I have someone who will do the stats effects. You can mix and you can match, and you can make it so that everyone has as much magic as possible, while also keeping it fresh in battle, right? And just leveling up, figuring out all of it. And I think that's cool. So you have this idea that yes, you're dishing out damage while trying to avoid taking it. Um, but you also have the ideas like if you take it, you're trying to nullify it, lessen it, or recover from it, or repurpose it for some other thing, right? So you have all that, right? And then you have different abilities, right? Because like each character has their own job, their own class, whatever you want to call it, and the idea is like they have different abilities. And I think it's really cool with Final Fantasy VI because you see some stuff that you haven't seen, and I dig it. So with these different abilities, you have some that might be straight up damage dealers, right? I'm trying to think of a really good example. I think like Cyan, like his abilities, and you can learn different abilities depending on the character. With Cyan, he can learn different abilities throughout that game, and you might have some that like drain like MP or HP, if I recall correctly. Some that might do a status effect, but then a lot of his there are a fair amount of damage dealers in there, and one might be like, oh, well, it attacks multiple members of the party at once, but then you might have something like Flurry, or later on Tempest, where you do like four cuts, four attacks. In this case, it's like randomized. You don't get to choose it in that sense. But the idea is like, well, his abilities have versatilities. Like it's Bushido, right? Um, so that's one case, right? But then you have someone like Locke, whose abilities like steal. And I like that in the game that, like some people will call him a thief and he says he's an adventurer and that is his job. Like, in that larger sense, like in that like class sense, is but the adventurer job has a lot of similarities to the thief job. So I like that. In any case, right? Like so he has like steal, and that allows you to steal an item from an opponent, but it's not always successful. Or some um, bosses or enemies you can't steal from. And then some was like, well, if you deal more damage, that heightens the chance that you're able to steal. And just to be clear, steal doesn't actually do damage. So it's just like, well, do I want to take this turn and possibly get an item where it might be basic, it might be something a little bit more rare, or do I just attack? Now, later on, you do get a relic that allows that steal command to become mug, in which case you're stealing while doing damage, and the only thing is like it takes up a slot, but I think it's worth it. Um, but anyway, you have like I said, it's like Scion, his Bushido or Locke's steel slash mug ability. Then you have someone like Celeste with her runic ability, where it's like you use that and like she's a magnet for magical attacks, and she'll take that in and it will generate some health. So that's something to consider. But it takes a turn to use it, and someone might not be using that magic attack right away. But if they do, she's good at deflecting that. Or then you might have someone like Terra, who for story reasons. And I did say spoilers, so it's like for story reasons, she is part Esper, and she can actually turn into her Esper form throughout battle. Now it takes a turn to activate it, so that turn you're not doing damage, but you dish out more damage if she's in that form. So like later in the game, you might not want to use that much because you're already dishing out like the max amount of damage potentially, right? But through a good deal of that game, it's worth it. And I'd argue like depending on your situation later in the game, it still may be worth it. Sometimes, just because it's cool. And she has a gauge associated with that. And there are other abilities that the characters have, but those are some that come to mind. And I think with those four in particular, those were the ones that I used the most. Uh, but my point is, regardless of what the ability is, it's mathematical in nature at the end of the day, because everything is. But like in this way, like ways that I feel like you can see better. Um, with that in mind, so the combat is turn-based, but it's an active time battle system, ATB. If you play some Final Fantasy games, notably the ones after four, for a good stretch, they had that system. And the idea is like, okay, yes, it's turn-based, but depending on the speed stats, you see your gauge fill up some faster than others, and when that gauge fills up, you can attack. And there are ways to increase that. Like I said, like with the speed stat is one, right? Because as your characters get faster, their ATB gauge fills up sooner. Or if you cast haste, that'll fill it up sooner. And possibly different types of attacks past that, right? So in any case, like there's so much to consider, so many customization options, and the crazy part about Final Fantasy VI is it has like an insane amount of playable characters. As far as ones that are main that stick around, right? You can have up to 14, with two of those characters being optional. And honestly, if you don't know their thing, you might actually miss them. But then another character that comes up that there's a chance for you to have them for the rest of the game on a more permanent basis, but you can also miss that chance. Um, and that character, for the record, is Shadow. Shadow has like the ninja job, can throw items. Like you can buy different items and throw them, and you could have like ones that dish out heavy hitting damage on a singular opponent, or ones that are groups. So like things like Flame Scroll, Thunder Scroll, things like that. Um, those are like the group based stuff, but then like something like Shuriken is dishing out damage on a single level. Then there's some other scrolls that Shadow can use. The Shadow is an interesting character because um, he's not like some of the other ones where it's just like, hey, they're with you, just regularly throughout the plot, and then they're not if they're off somewhere. With Shadow, there's parts where yes, Shadow joins your party is part of the story, but then there's other parts where Shadow can join your party if you pay Shadow. And I think that's interesting. But yeah, so you have up to 14 playable characters that you could have um, by the end of it. And that's crazy because you can really customize, you can mix and match. But I would recommend, um, all right. So if you're the type of person where you've been like beefing up most of your characters, and like some are in and out of the story, but like there's a lot of the story which you can where you can choose. So if you have like four that you're focusing on, because you can have four up to four at any given time, right, on that regular basis. If you have four that you're focused on, like I did, then it's like okay, fine, have that, have them have their high levels, but also mix in other people, have them level up over time. To a degree, this will happen naturally as you're playing because different characters shift in and out of story, and people are growing, but they don't grow at the same rates, right? So if you're gonna like do that, it's like, and you want things balanced by the end, so you have a better shot, because you will be using at least 12 of the 14 characters by the end, or at least you can use up to 12 to 14 when you're doing that last like dungeon crawl, that last fight. um what you can do, is yes, you can focus on your main people, but when you get to that like end stage of the game, you can do some, experience farming, right? You can find some spots that have some tough enemies and go from there. Like I forgot the exact name, but there was like one of the continents um that you have in the game where they have these like dinosaur enemies that, if you're playing low level, that might be hard to beat, but like if you're playing pretty late in game, you can beat them pretty readily. Um so they're a good spot for your experience points, but also like building up your magic as well. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff like that. Also, one of the big parts of the game is like the items and resource management as a whole. So is you are navigating the game, you are building up your resources. You're getting different items. Some of them are going to be weapons, some of them are going to be gear, some of them are going to be relics. But as far as the general items are concerned, you'll have things like potions and high potions, things like that heal your health, different status ailment cures, things like antidotes, or eye drops, or later on just more general remedies which can cure any ailment, or for the most part. So you have different items like that. You'll have different things like sleeping bags and tents, which allow you to heal your parties. Like if you're in open world or if you're at a save point, the sleeping bags allow you to, bring back HP, MP, and cure status effects of one particular party member. The tent is the whole party member. The sleeping bags are cheaper. The tent's more expensive, so you have to make some choices. By the end of it, you're bringing in so much money that you can buy like the max of everything. Um, and that's another thing, right? The money, right? So is you're getting these different items. Some of them you're finding along the way. Some of them you can buy, right? You can buy the more general items. You can buy the weapon, the gear, and you'll come to different towns where they have their different items, their different prices. You also have the idea of ends, where you can do the same thing as sleeping bag and tent, where you're recovering HP, you're recovering MP, and you're removing status effects. And those are different prices, different parts of the game, right? Um, and so all that is pretty cool because like you have that basic idea that you're just dishing out damage while trying to not take it. And over time you get to see how that basic idea can expand. And that's all math, right? Because like I said, you have that basic idea, but then you also have the idea of magic. You also have the idea of espers, building up items. I'm sorry, building up experience points and leveling up, having items, using those items, having the resource management where you're deciding, well, how much of this item am I going to buy and when am I going to use it? How often am I going to use it? You have all these things, and all the while you are gaining all these things, while you're fighting all these battles, you're navigating the world. You're navigating the story. You are growing as your characters are growing. You're experiencing what they're experiencing. So you have this like level of empathy built in that comes with video games, like that I think is just kind of magical to me, right? Because it's this interactive empathy, right? Pulls you in a way I think like a lot of things just can't. Don't get me wrong. I think like things like books, TV shows, movies, and stuff like that, there are definitely these incredible moments of empathy, but there's just something about that more interactive nature that comes with video games that's just really cool to me. So with all that in mind, right? There's so much more you can talk about, and I've mentioned status effects a couple of times, so I do want to talk about those quickly, because a lot of you know what they are, right? But the idea is like, hey, you're doing your thing in battle, but there are certain things that can impair you or boost you up. You have the idea of status effects on that level, and as far as something that's beneficial, you might have something like haste, where it increases your speed and your ability to use the ATB gauge, or it fills it up so you can attack faster, hit harder, because you're hitting more times. You have stuff like that, so that's like beneficial, but you have a lot of like detrimental status effects. Status ailments. Like you can be poisoned, which like inflicts continuous damage. You have something like silent, which stops you from doing magic, or something like confused, where it's like, okay, maybe you still attack the opponent, but you could attack yourself. You could attack your allies. Then something like berserk, which is like that could go either way because it could be bad in the sense that you know you cannot use any other thing than attack command. Like it's just keeps on going. You keep on attacking and attacking on your turn. That could be good if you just don't want to worry about things and you want to just dish out the damage and your character can take it. But it could be bad because then you can't use magic, right? You can't use an esper. Um, so there's things like what I mentioned, and all of that is math at the end of the day, and I think that's cool. Now, as far as the story goes, like I think it's amazing. You have a lot of cool characters, and you get to see how they deal with the world, and you get to find out more about them. And then, like, and again, I said spoilers ahead at the beginning of this. Spoilers ahead for the rest of this, uh, just in case. Here we go. Um, so you have that idea of how these characters are dealing with the world and dealing with an empire that is overreaching in terms of power. And then you deal with a villain like Kefka, who the emperor like uh, thought that he could control, but clearly couldn't. And you have the idea of like the world of balance or so-called balance, like the original world as you see it, and then the world of ruin. And Final Fantasy VI is an interesting game because you get to not only see like the villain win, albeit temporarily, but you get to see that temporary state was actually pretty long because Kefka does his thing, pretty much wrecks the world, and it stays wrecked for a year. And even after the good guys win, it's like they still have to recover. Not all the damage was undone, and a lot of people died. So it's pretty crazy in that way, that you see the villain win and that victory lasts for a while. But not only on that, you see how characters deal with this new world, because they tried really hard and still failed. So you get to see how everyone dealt with that and how they're dealing with it because you do the time skip, and it's pretty fascinating, because like you're experiencing things like Celeste would, like she was in a coma for that year, and you know so we get to experience this new world as she does, and it gets fascinating. And like I said, I've replayed it recently, or I don't know if I said that in this video or not, but I replayed it recently, and it was so much more expansive in that world of ruin section than I recall. So in any case, you have these amazing characters, and even though Kefka is an absolute jerk, he's an interesting villain. And I dig Final Fantasy VI as a whole. And honestly, just like on the characters and the story alone, I could say that, right? But like the gameplay is killer to me, and I dig it. One other thing I wanted to mention about the gameplay, because it's like something that you could miss. If you're someone who's cautious, you might miss the debut of limit breaks under the name desperation attacks. So with Final Fantasy VI, it introduced the idea of desperation attacks where like your health gets low, and your command is replaced with another command that allows you to dish out way more damage. And over time, you see that idea under different names, but limit break is probably the most popular, And over time, you see it not only be something that can dish out damage, but different status effects or just so many different effects in general. But with damage, increased damage output being really high up there. And then it's like there are different ways to activate that over time. But if you're someone who are like super cautious while playing six, you might have actually missed the desperation attacks because you might not have been in a position where you actually got to use them. It's all on how you play the game. But yeah, so six was an interesting game that holds up. Right, this is the 30th year anniversary of Final Fantasy VI is of this year, at the time of recording, and it lives up to the hype. It was great when I've played it in the past. It's been great playing it now. And I'm sure I will play it again in the future, and it will still be great. If you've played it, I hope you enjoyed yourself. If you haven't, but you were curious and you watched all this, I hope you still play it. Yeah. So I'll see you all in the future. Professor Prime out. Final Fantasy VI rocks. Okay, I'm out for real this time.